As Ruben Vardanyan said, it's the moment to tell the stories of the people who really work on the ground, and this gives me the opportunity, very briefly before we get into the conversation, to introduce to you the members of the Aurora family that I had the opportunity to meet in Yerevan in June, and you saw them in the video, but some of them are sitting here, so maybe you, from behind, you can't see it. So I'd like to introduce to you, first of all, the laureate 2018, Chola Aung, sitting over there, the lawyer in Myanmar. As you heard, a Rohingya activist, and he spent 12 years in jail for his fight. Then I'd like to introduce to you the first laureate, Aurora Laureate, Margaret Barankitse. Called Maggie, as I know, and she saved many thousand children during the civil war in Burundi, and she's a Tutsi herself, and she saved many, many Hutu lives, and she's still doing that work in Rwanda now, caring for orphans, HIV orphans and war orphans. And I'd like to introduce to you Sunita Krishnan, whom I met also. She was one of the finalists of the 2018 Aurora Prize. It was a very, very fascinating ceremony, incidentally. They woke us up in the middle of the night and took us to Ararat Mountain, to the Turkish border, and we had a view on Ararat Mountain as the sun rose, and then Chong was pronounced the laureate, and Sunita was one of the finalists, so I'm very happy to be able to introduce them all to you. She will be on a panel tomorrow, and she does great work in India. She co-founded an organization called Prayabal that fights against the sexual exploitation of girls and women. So, but now we want to talk to Tom Catena. If your life had taken just a normal way, you would be now working as an engineer in the States. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
How come you're working as a physician in the Nuba Mountains in Sudan?
Well, I guess initially when I was in college studying engineering, my initial goal in life was to be a missionary, and I didn't know what direction that would take. I studied mechanical engineering in college, and that does not lend itself to missionary work. So after I finished college, the idea just popped into my head that I should go into medicine. That was a career much more amenable to that kind of life. And I was coming back from my aunt's funeral, and the idea came to my head. So maybe it was the spirit of my aunt that planted that idea, who knows. Anyway, I went out to medical school, went out to Duke Medical School, got out, did my training, and then finally finished with everything. It was time to practice as a doctor, and I came straight to Africa and started in Kenya almost 20 years ago.
And then you helped build up this hospital of the Mother of Mercy in the Nuba Mountains in Sudan. Could you tell, and you've been working there for 10 years now.
Right.
So could you describe a typical day? What happens on a typical day in the Nuba Mountains hospital?
Yeah, I'm there as a Catholic missionary, so I start my day around 6 o'clock with saying the rosary, go to church at 6:30, we have a mass from 6:30 to 7 o'clock. Try to start my daily routine with that, to put my mind at ease and get me focused for the day. After Mass, I come back and start the ward rounds. Start rounds about 7:30 in the morning. And depending if there's fighting or not fighting, if there's a measles outbreak or not, we go through all the see all the patients. That's anywhere from 300 to 500 patients in a ward round. And go through that Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Wednesday and Friday are operating room days, so get up around the same time, do a quick round, and then go to the operating room, go through about 15 patients in the operating room. Nighttime I'm on call and see what happens during the night.
So you do about 1,000 operations a year, and for a long time it was the only hospital, and you were the only doctor in an area and serving about almost 1 million people.
Almost 1 million people, yeah. Right. The size of Austria. I'm going to give you a rough guide.
Yeah. And could you tell us just briefly about the political situation? Why do the people come for normal diseases and wounds, but they also come because of their war, the air raidings?
So we're in the Nuba Mountains, which is in Sudan, and we're in we live in rebel-held territory. And the civil war broke out in June 2011. So the initial 6 years of that civil war, there was heavy fighting, a lot of aerial bombardments, artillery shelling, ground fighting. So we would get huge numbers of wounded coming any go. I mean, be it 100, 200 people coming at a go onto the hospital with all manner of battle wounds. So that was a big part of our practice at the time. For the past year and a half, there's been a ceasefire. There's not been any new fighting or aerial bombardment, thanks be to God. Although I think that both sides in the equation are not close to any peace agreement, I think fighting's probably going to break out again sometime in the next few months. Try not to be pessimistic, but I think that's the reality.
And many other NGOs, or all other NGOs, have left the area, if they ever were there. I mean, the ones who were there left, you didn't. Why not? What keeps you going?
Yeah, you know, in June 2011, a lot of the NGOs did leave. And my sponsoring organization said, the place is too dangerous, you have to get out. And I said, well, I can't get out because people don't have a doctor then. At that time, there was no other doctor in Nuba Mountains. So I went against their advice and I stayed on. I think I could not leave in good conscience and leave these people behind. I stayed, the sisters stayed, and the priests stayed. We all stayed behind to cater to the people there. The way I saw it, and the way I know the sisters and the priests saw it, is we're here as missionaries. We're supposed to be showing the love of Christ to these people. How's it look if the war breaks out, there are problems here, and we take off? I don't think that's a good example. So we all decided to stay and stick it out, and it's gone fine. We're still alive.
Thank you. We have a short video for you to make it more understandable what his work looks like. Can we maybe show that video at this point?
The thing that impresses me about the Nuba is their sense of independence and their feeling of pride, but we have a sense of dignity. We are humans. We're the equal to anybody else. I love that about them. When the war started, this is June 2011, most of the humanitarian organizations, there weren't so many, but the ones that were here in the mountains, most of them left. Some of the hospital staff, the expatriate staff left. I stayed behind, Amoni sisters stayed behind, and the priests stayed behind. We all felt the same thing. We felt this is really the moment of need for the people here. All that time when I was the only doctor, I was responsible for all the patient wards. So I was the doctor doing the rounds and following the progress and taking care of them. You know, what that really helped was the staff really pulled together. When those things happen, you say, I'll do any other job in the world. Let me be an accountant, because books don't bleed, people don't die, you're just doing numbers. And your brain is just on fire.
I know that in 2016 you were already nominated as an Aurora Prize finalist, and you said at that time that you could not leave the hospital even for 3 or 4 days to go to Yerevan. And then in the next year they persuaded you to come to Yerevan by saying that some Armenian doctors would take your place during that time. And now you have become the ambassador of Aurora, which means that you're going to leave the hospital for quite a while during the year. What do you hope to accomplish through this prize, or what makes you take this turn?
Yeah, well, I think anybody that's ever talked with Ruben and Nubar and Vartan, they're very difficult to say no to. So they managed to convince me to come out. And I think the hook they got me with was they said, look, you're kind of pigeonholed. You're there in Nuba Mountains, you're doing your thing at a small scale. Come work with us for a period of time. Let's try to scale this up. Let's try to take what Aurora's doing, put it on the global stage. And I think that really is what appealed to me. And I hope during this short time I have with Aurora that I can do that. That can sort of bring together people in the bush, people that are on the ground that are doing the work, and then these big humanitarian groups and other actors everybody can kind of pitch in, work together, and try to find some solutions on a bigger scale than what we're already doing in Nuba.
Yeah, you say you're not a political person yourself. You don't see yourself as a political person. But what do you expect from the global community or from the people assembled here? What kind of help? What do you expect? What would you want?
Well, I think for the work we do, the one thing you need is money. You can't do anything without money. So, I would say free up some cash for people that are on the ground doing work and make the system easier for the guys that are doing the job. A lot of the big humanitarian donor agencies work with larger organizations on the ground, and the requirements that they need are very onerous. They're too much for the small actors. So I would hope to engage them in the conversation that, look, we need the help there, but let's try to ease up on the requirements. Make us accountable, but not to the point where we have to hire a full staff just to fill the paperwork out to get the job done.
Mm-hmm. So it's basically money.
Yes.
That's the most needed.
Yeah.
And what else would there be?
Well, besides money, then advocacy and political support to push these rogue governments into an area where they're forced to take care of their own people. I mean, a lot of the issues we have that we'll be talking about today and tomorrow are due to poor governance, governments that hate their own people. If you didn't have that, if they were forced into an area where they had to do the right thing, you wouldn't have some of these issues we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I know that you were going to be speaking more about that on the panel later on.